So today on DW Wood Builds, we're going to build this chisel and punch holder. Join us.
When you first start blacksmithing, one of the first ways that you hold a chisel or a punch is with your bare hand. We've all done it. The problem is when you're working with hot materials, it gets hot, and it gets hot fast. Next is to use a mill glove. That protects your hand from the heat, but it's awkward and sometimes obstructs your view so you can't see. Or you could use tongs or vice grips. Tongs have to be reset between heats. Vice grips continue to hold, but because of the angle that you're holding them, can be awkward. The holder we are building gives the security of the vice grips, but are easier to hold and to use. For this project, we're going to need 8 inches of 1 inch by 1 inch square tube 16 gauge, 8.5 inches of 3/8 inch all thread coarse thread, half inch length of 3/4 pipe 16 gauge. We will need a 1 inch by 1 inch by 3/16 inch square. We will need a 3/8 inch nut. We will also need a 3/8 inch coarse threaded wing nut and a 3/8 inch washer. We're going to start off measuring 8.5 inches of the 3/8 all thread rod. This will run down the center of the handle and will be used to provide tension for the tool that we're holding. We place it in the vise. Notice that we're using soft jaws so we do not damage the threads, and we cut it. In this case, I'm using a hacksaw. After cutting, I use a file to clean up the ends. Then I use the wing nut to check the threads to make sure that it will screw on smoothly. The next step is to remove the zinc coating from the nut and the all thread. We need to do this because they're going to be welded. Welding zinc coated metal will result in the zinc being vaporized. Breathing in the zinc vapors can cause metal fume fever, which can be deadly. To remove the zinc, we're using a strong muriatic acid solution. Because it is a very powerful acid, I'm using protective equipment such as the gloves and eye protection. Another option would be to soak the parts in white vinegar overnight. Because the muriatic acid is so strong, it only takes a few minutes to remove the zinc plating. Once the zinc plating has been removed, I remove the parts from the muriatic acid and rinse them in a solution of water and baking soda to neutralize the acid. The next step is to measure 8 inches of the square tube that we'll be using as a handle. And we cut it, and once again I choose to use a hacksaw. And because apparently I can't saw in a straight line, I'm going to have to use an angle grinder to clean up the end. Then a little bit of file work to clean up the edges so they're not sharp and won't cut me when I'm using the tool later. Now we measure the inside of the tube and we transfer that measurement to the pipe. Once again, I use a hacksaw to cut the pipe, this time being very careful to cut it in a straight line. There's a bit of rag after the hacksawing, so I use a file to clean up the edges. After filing, I do a quick test fit to make sure it will slide easily in and out of the handle. And now we will use the pipe segment to measure how deep of a slot to cut into the handle. We'll cut the slot as a V wedge so that the tool that we're trying to hold will index into the slot and hold it securely. Because I'm cutting across the opened end, I'm careful to notch each side so I can properly index the blade so I can make accurate cuts. The edges are sharp and ragged, so again I use a file to clean them up. And again I do another quick test fit to make sure it's smooth. Measuring 1 inch of the 1 inch strip that will be cut and then welded onto the end of the handle to form the end cap. Using some sandpaper to clean up the end cap. If I'd been smart, I would have cleaned it with the angle grinder before I cut it off the 1 inch strip. A quick fit check against the end of the handle. And now we find the center of the end cap. A quick tap with a center punch and we're ready to drill it out. We drill a small pilot hole and then we switch over to the 3/8 inch bit. Again, use a file to clean up the rag and then prep the sides to get them ready for welding. And now using my flux core MIG welder, I lightly weld each corner. And yes, I suck at welding. And now using an angle grinder, I clean up my crappy welds. And now I weld the 3/4 inch length of pipe to the thread. Notice I've screwed a nut to the end of the thread to give me more working area for the weld. Use a file to clean up the welding splatter and any rough welds, and totally oblivious to the fact that I'm wearing my welding helmet while I'm trying to film this segment. Now all the components are welded together, so I need to do a final fit. I work to fit the thread through the end plate of the handle and make sure that the pipe segment will easily slide through the wedged end. Now that the holder is fully assembled, I'll give it a try by holding a center punch and testing it on some wood.
I just want to say how much I appreciate y'all following along as we built the chisel and punch holder today. Some of you are going to say is, wait a second, you welded that, and I don't have a welder. Well, the next couple of videos we're going to show you other options of how to build the same functional tool without welding. So tune in next time, and until then, get out and build something.